Maria could feel the pressure mounting, but she held her ground. She knew what was coming next. The way Richard Caldwell operated was no secret. Those who defied him never lasted long in his company. But Maria had made her choice, and no matter what happened next, she wasn't going to regret it. For a moment, the entire lobby felt frozen in time. The weight of Maria's words hung in the air, pressing down on everyone. No one had ever dared to speak to Richard Caldwell like that. The CEO's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. The employees standing nearby exchanged nervous glances. Some looked impressed by Maria's courage, while others seemed uneasy, already predicting what would happen next. No one stood up for her. No one stepped in. They all knew Richard's reputation. Defiance was met with consequences. Richard let out a slow breath, straightening his tie. "I see," he said coolly. "You think you're above following orders." Maria didn't flinch. "I think respect goes both ways." His lips pressed into a thin line. There was no shouting, no dramatic outburst, but the air around him turned colder. He wasn't used to losing, and Maria could see it in the way his fingers twitched slightly at his side. "Maybe you've forgotten your place," he said, his voice quieter now, but sharper than before. "Maybe you need a reminder." Maria braced herself. She had been in this building long enough to know how quickly people could be replaced. The company saw janitors as disposable, just names on a schedule. If Richard wanted to, he could have her fired in an instant. Still, she refused to back down. "I know my place," she said, "and it's not on my knees cleaning your shoes." A silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Then, without another word, Richard turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the marble floors. He didn't look back. The moment he disappeared into the elevator, hushed whispers filled the lobby. Some employees hurried off as if afraid they'd be caught standing too close to her. Others lingered, sneaking quick glances before heading for the exits. One woman, a junior assistant named Claire, hesitated before stepping closer. She had always been polite to Maria, one of the few who acknowledged her presence with a smile. "That was brave," Claire whispered. "But, you know he's not going to let this go, right?" Maria forced a small smile. "I know." Claire hesitated, then sighed. "Just be careful." And with that, she walked off, leaving Maria standing alone in the vast, empty lobby. She picked up her mop, her hands steady even as her heart pounded. She had no idea what was coming next, but she knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, Maria arrived at work with a sinking feeling in her stomach. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with possibilities. Would she even have a job when she walked through those glass doors? Would security be waiting to escort her out? She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby was just as spotless as she had left it, the air filled with the soft hum of conversations and the distant clicking of keyboards. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But as Maria moved through the halls, she noticed the way people looked at her, some with curiosity, others with pity, and a few with something that almost resembled admiration. Then she saw Claire, the assistant from the night before. Claire hurried over, glancing around as if making sure no one was watching. "Maria," she whispered, her voice urgent. "I just heard something. Richard's furious. He's calling a meeting about you." Maria's chest tightened. "A meeting?" Claire nodded. "With HR and the executives. He wants you gone." Maria had expected this, but hearing it out loud made it real. She had worked in this building for years, and with a single act of defiance, she was being thrown away like she was nothing. But deep down, she had always known the truth. People like Richard Caldwell never saw workers like her as equals. They only noticed them when it was convenient, when they needed something, or in this case, when they wanted to make an example out of them. Claire hesitated before adding, "But there's more." Maria's pulse quickened. "What?" "He's not just firing you," Claire whispered. "He's making sure you never get hired anywhere else. He's calling other companies, warning them about you. He wants to ruin you. Maria felt a chill run through her. This was more than just punishment. This was revenge. Richard wasn't satisfied with firing her. He wanted to make sure she had no future, no options. He wanted to break her spirit. Maria clenched her jaw. She had spent her whole life working hard, earning her place, proving her worth. And now, one man, with one petty grudge, was trying to take everything away from her. She could feel the pressure building, the weight of it all pressing down on her. But she wasn't going to crumble. Not now. Not when she had come this far. Maria had a choice to make. She could accept her fate, walk away quietly, and let Richard Caldwell win, or she could fight back. And as she looked around the office, at the people who were too afraid to speak up, too afraid to stand against the man in power, she knew what she had to do. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something much bigger. And Richard Caldwell had no idea what was coming next. Maria took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had never been the type to cause trouble, but this wasn't just about losing her job anymore. Richard Caldwell wanted to ruin her completely, and she couldn't just let that happen. She walked past the break room, past the rows of desks, ignoring the hushed whispers around her. Then she saw him, Richard, standing near his office, talking to a group of executives. He didn't even acknowledge her presence. It was as if he had already erased her from the company, like she was nothing more than a problem he had dealt with. But Maria wasn't erased, not yet. As she turned a corner, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw an unknown number calling. Normally she wouldn't answer, but something told her to pick up. "Hello," she said cautiously. A deep voice responded, low and urgent. "Maria, this is Daniel Carter. I work in legal." Maria frowned. "Legal?" "I don't have much time," Daniel said. "But I need you to listen carefully. I saw what happened last night, and I know what Richard's trying to do." Maria's grip on the phone tightened. "So, you know he's trying to blacklist me?" A pause. Then Daniel lowered his voice. "It's bigger than that. He's trying to cover something up." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Daniel sighed. "I've been reviewing some company records. Richard's been making some questionable financial moves. There are reports that don't add up, missing expenses, money shifting between accounts that shouldn't be. And here's the thing, there's a cleaning budget that's double what it should be." Maria blinked, confused. "A cleaning budget?" "Yes," Daniel said, "and your name is on it." Maria's breath caught in her throat. "What?" "He's been funneling money through departments that no one pays attention to," Daniel explained. "Janitorial services, building maintenance, expenses that get approved without a second glance. But after what happened last night, he realized you're not someone who will just take orders blindly. He's afraid you'll start asking questions." Maria's mind was spinning. Richard wasn't just trying to fire her out of spite. He was getting rid of her because she was a loose end. She had unknowingly been tied to whatever scheme he was running, and now that she had stood up to him, she was a threat. She swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Daniel hesitated. "If you go to HR, they'll side with him. The board won't do anything unless they have proof. But if you're willing, I can help you find it." Maria looked back toward Richard's office. He was still laughing with the executives, completely unaware that his carefully built house of cards was about to start shaking. This wasn't just about her job anymore. This was about justice, and Maria was ready to fight. Maria's pulse raced as she ended the call. She had a choice: walk away and let Richard Caldwell bury her career, or take a risk and expose the truth. She tightened her grip on her phone. She knew what she had to do. Over the next few hours, Maria and Daniel worked quietly behind the scenes. He sent her documents, reports with strange discrepancies, and emails Richard had tried to keep buried. The more Maria read, the clearer it became. Richard had been embezzling company funds for years, using departments like janitorial services to hide it. And now Maria had the proof. But exposing a man like Richard Caldwell wasn't easy. He had power, connections, and influence. If Maria wanted to take him down, she needed to hit him where it hurt, the public. That evening, she created an anonymous email account and sent everything, every document, every transaction, every falsified report, to a well-known investigative journalist. Within minutes, she got a reply. "This is huge. We're running with it." Maria's hands shook as she put her phone down. It was done. All she could do now was wait. The grand office lobby gleamed under the bright lights, its polished floors reflecting the power and prestige of those who walked upon it. Employees bustled about, their heels clicking against the marble, rushing to meetings, closing deals, chasing success. But amid the suits and ties, one person moved quietly, unnoticed: Maria, the janitor. Maria had worked in this office building for years, her hands raw from endless scrubbing, her back aching from long shifts. She had always believed in the dignity of hard work, never complaining, never asking for recognition. But on this particular evening, as the last few employees trickled out, something happened that would change everything. The CEO of the company, a man named Richard Caldwell, strode through the lobby, his expensive shoes tapping against the floor. He was the kind of man who never glanced at the people cleaning up after him, never stopped to wonder about their lives. To him, power meant control, and respect was something only the powerful deserved. As he walked, he suddenly stopped, glancing down at his designer shoes. A single speck of dust clung to the polished leather. His brows furrowed in annoyance. With a sharp turn, he spotted Maria nearby, mopping the floor. Without hesitation, he called her over. "You," he snapped, pointing at her. "Clean this." Maria hesitated for a moment, confused. She thought he was talking about the floor, until he lifted his foot slightly. He expected her to clean his shoes. Right there, in front of everyone. A few employees still lingering nearby fell silent, watching the scene unfold. Some looked away, embarrassed for her. Others exchanged glances but said nothing. No one dared to challenge the CEO. Maria felt her face burn. She had spent years scrubbing floors, wiping tables, cleaning up after others, but never had anyone treated her like this. She wasn't a servant. She wasn't beneath anyone. But Richard Caldwell clearly thought otherwise. For a long moment, Maria stood still. She could feel her heart pounding, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She could swallow her pride and do as he asked. Or she could choose a different path, one that no one, not even Richard Caldwell, saw coming. What happened next left the entire office speechless, and as the days passed, it became a story no one in the company would ever forget. Maria's fingers tightened around the mop handle. She could feel every pair of eyes in the room on her, waiting to see what she would do. The humiliation sat heavy in her chest, but so did something else, something stronger. For years, she had been invisible. People walked past her without a second glance, as if she was part of the building itself. But now, in this moment, everyone saw her. And not because of her hard work, not because of the countless nights she had stayed late cleaning their messes. No, they saw her because Richard Caldwell had put her on display, treating her like she was less than him. Maria took a slow breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She wasn't going to let him see her break. Without a word, she set her mop aside and walked toward him. Richard smirked, crossing his arms as he waited. He looked so sure of himself, so certain that she would kneel before him. But Maria had no intention of kneeling. As she stood just a foot away, she looked him right in the eye. It was the first time she had ever truly seen him up close. His suit was sharp, his watch gleamed under the lobby lights, and his shoes, despite the tiny speck of dust, were polished to perfection. He had everything: power, money, status. But something about the way he looked at her told Maria one thing: he had never been told no. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. The employees who had stayed behind shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to step in or stay quiet. No one had ever dared to challenge Richard Caldwell, not even his own executives. Maria finally spoke, her voice steady. "I clean floors, not shoes." The words weren't loud, but they cut through the air like a knife. A few people gasped quietly. Richard's smirk faltered for just a second before he let out a dry chuckle. "Excuse me," he said, tilting his head. "You work here, don't you? You're paid to clean. That means you do what you're told." Maria felt her stomach tighten, but she didn't back down. "I do my job with respect, just like everyone else in this building. But cleaning your shoes..." She shook her head. "That's not my job." Richard's expression darkened. The amusement disappeared from his face, replaced with something colder. "You think you're in a position to refuse?" he asked. Maria could feel the pressure mounting, but she held her ground. She knew what was coming next. The way Richard Caldwell operated was no secret. Those who defied him never lasted long in his company. The next morning, chaos erupted. News outlets picked up the story within hours, exposing Richard's fraud to the world. Employees whispered in shock as headlines flashed across their phones. Investors panicked. The board of directors called for an emergency meeting. And Richard Caldwell, he stormed into the office, his face red with fury. Maria was cleaning in the hallway when she heard his office door slam open. "Find out who did this," he barked at his assistant. "I want names. Now." But it was too late. Security arrived minutes later, followed by members of the board. Maria watched from a distance as Richard argued, his voice rising, his usual air of confidence unraveling. Then, the moment everyone had been waiting for, security escorted him out. Employees stood frozen, some whispering, others recording the moment. Richard's face twisted with rage as he looked around the office, searching for someone to blame. His gaze locked onto Maria. For the first time, Maria met his stare without fear. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She just stood tall, knowing she had won. As Richard was led out of the building, a strange silence followed. Then, one by one, people began clapping. A small, hesitant applause that grew louder. Claire rushed over, her eyes wide. "Maria, did you?" Maria just picked up her mop. Guess he finally got what was coming. But just as she turned, her phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel. Asterisk, asterisk, we found something else. And this goes even deeper than we thought. Asterisk, asterisk. Maria stared at the screen, her heart pounding. This wasn't over. Not yet. Maria's fingers hovered over her phone screen as she read Daniel's message again. Even after everything that had happened, there was still more. She exhaled slowly. A part of her wanted to walk away, to let the company deal with the fallout, but another part of her knew she couldn't ignore this. Not after coming this far. She called Daniel. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice steady. Daniel hesitated before answering. "More missing funds. But this time, they're linked to people outside the company, high-profile investors, government contracts." Richard wasn't just pocketing money for himself, he was covering for others. Maria's stomach twisted. So, even though he's gone, the corruption isn't over. "No," Daniel admitted. "But now people are paying attention. The board is in full damage control mode, and authorities are already investigating. We started something, Maria. This isn't just about a greedy CEO anymore. It's bigger than that." Maria processed his words. She had never seen herself as someone who could change things. She was just a janitor, someone people overlooked. But now she had played a role in something that went far beyond her. Later that afternoon, the company sent out an official statement. Richard Caldwell was permanently removed from his position, pending a full financial investigation. Employees whispered about what would happen next, but one thing was clear: things were changing. As Maria packed up her cart for the day, Claire walked up to her with a hesitant smile. "I think you just made history," she said with a small laugh. "I mean, how many people take down a CEO in a week?" Maria chuckled, shaking her head. "I didn't do it alone." Claire nodded. "Still, you stood up to him when no one else would. That's not small." Maria thought back to that moment in the lobby, when Richard had demanded she clean his shoes. How different things were now. She wasn't just someone in the background anymore. She had a voice, and she had used it. A few days later, she received another call, this time from a company she had applied to months ago. "We saw what you did," the woman on the other end said. "We could use someone with your courage. Are you interested?" Maria smiled. "I think I am." As she stepped out of the building for the last time, she felt lighter. The fight was over, at least for her. And though she didn't know what would come next, one thing was certain: she would never let anyone make her feel small again.